Good morning. Good morning and happy Sabbath. For those of you who probably have never heard this term before, happy Sabbath, I'm sure you've been around long enough to hear it, but if you haven't, it's simply a way of acknowledging that every now and again, we as humans need pause. We need rest. And we celebrate the fact that we get a weekly pause in our activity, in the pressures of needing to be something or someone or accomplishing some goal or meeting someone else's objectives. That every now and again we get a 24-hour period where it doesn't matter what the boss says. It doesn't matter what's happening with the neighbor. It doesn't matter what the burdens I hold. I get to let go and say, there's someone bigger taking care of me. I'm not the one taking care of me. Do not worry about your life, for the pagans run after these things. But seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added unto you. You know, as we enter into our second week of detox, the idea is that our time has become toxic. We've put everything in every single living hour that we have. We try to do. And last week we talked about that the idea is that we are called to be. We are human beings, although we've been acting like human doings. And so today, as we enter into our second week, we learned last week that the best thing for us every now and again is to rest, because all of our doing doesn't necessarily actually add up to anything. It seems like we do, but we don't actually know what we're accomplishing. I was speaking to an entrepreneur back in the States, and he was sharing with me some of his woes, and I deal with different people who are starting businesses. I love business. I love organization. I love structuring. I love innovation. I love ideas. And so people every now and again would call me and just share their ideas with me. And as I was talking to him about everything that he was dealing with, I said, have you taken a moment just to pause? Just to relax, because just in our last few minutes, you shared with me 25 things that you're doing. And all of these things require time. Have you taken a day to just sit down and write down your thoughts? You're so involved in everything that you haven't gotten a chance to look back and see how they all connect together. And you could tell that it was great advice. And you could tell that he really wanted to do it. But the pressures of all the doing was going, this is ludicrous. You can't take a break. Look at all the things that you have to do. But what we often find, and what we talked about last week, is that sometimes it's in the pause that our mind clears up. I realized this past week that I now know why my best thinking happens in the shower. I've always been confused as to why is it that during the shower, all the great ideas start flooding through. What is it, the water? Why is it that my best thinking happens in the shower? And I thought, wait, I just realized this is the only moment I'm forced to stop. This is the time, the only thing I can be doing is being cleansed. And so at that moment, when the brain finally gets a chance to catch up with you, it says, all of these things you've been worried about, I actually have solutions. It's the one moment I get to hear. But I would be wrong to let you think that the only thing this Sabbath idea was about resting. It would be wrong to believe that the only requirement of Sabbath is rest. In Luke chapter 6, verse 1, we encounter Jesus and his disciples. Verse 1 says, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to pick some heads of grain, rub them in their hands, and eat the kernels. Some of the Pharisees asked, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus answered them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry?" You know, I have to admit, I love Jesus, okay? Because this guy's sense of humor is impeccable. The questions he asks are crazy. You know, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Let me see a coin. Whose coin is this? Oh, Jesus, of course it's Caesar's. Did you not read this part? He's talking to people, Pharisees and Sadducees. These guys write down the scroll. These guys study this stuff for a living. And he says, have you never read? He's basically saying, in the moments when you were memorizing the text, did you forget the meaning? When you were trying to make sure you understood what the doctrine was, did you not know how to practice it? Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and taking the consecrated bread, he ate what is lawful only for the priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." On another Sabbath, he went into the synagogue and was teaching. And a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and teachers of the law were there, and they, of course, had some plans. They were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Now, there's a little bonus message for just that before we continue. Not everyone who's watching for you is watching out for you. Not everyone who's looking at you is for you. Not everyone who's around you is with you. In fact, often they tell you at churches, and this is just, this is a freebie, not to say it happens here at Burwood, but most pastors know the people that come for you first are not the people who are on your side. Pastors understand that the people who are the loudest in the beginning are the folks who will be the loudest against you at the end. Now, those of you who came to me first, please don't feel guilty. I didn't think that about you. There are exceptions to rules. But Jesus is at church. This is the crazy part. He's at church. And the church leaders are waiting to entrap him. I hope this does not sound like Burwood. He's coming to a place of safety, but it's the very place that's setting up traps for him. And they're waiting to see what will he do in order for them to accuse him of something. And now this is what I love, because Jesus, knowing this, Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up and stand in front of everyone." So he got up and stood there. Now, here's the thing that really, as I'm looking at this text, that really grabs hold of me. The Pharisees, these religious rulers, are looking in at what Jesus is doing. They're seeking out for divine activity on Sabbath. And they're ready to accuse him of doing something wrong. Now, they're looking specifically, they're trying to see, will he heal? On Sabbath. Let me help you understand. I want to read this last part to you. But Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand. In other words, Jesus understood that the Pharisees and the religious leaders are looking at the same man he's looking at. That is, the man with the sickness is the center of attention for not only Jesus, but for the people who are trying to trap Jesus. And they're looking at the man not with compassion or pity, they're using him as bait. They too knew that this man was sick. And instead of being aware of his sickness, they're concerned of their doctrine. Their focus is to make sure their philosophy, their policy, their way of life stays intact. Who cares who's suffering? The earlier story talked about Jesus and disciples walking through the field on a Sabbath day. And they're walking through the field and they're plucking grain. The New Living Translation gives you an insight as to why they think it's work, because the New Living Translation says they're basically harvesting. Now, Jesus uses an example to display that their harvesting is not just to harvest, but that these disciples were hungry. Why? Because he gives a story about David when David was hungry. And he's saying that you're saying what you're trying to tell me is that my disciples should go hungry because it's Sabbath. And that somehow this 24-hour period is more important than meeting basic human need. And then he just throws everything off and he goes, I am the Lord of Sabbath. I am Lord of the Sabbath. That means I set the standard for what Sabbath should be like. You're talking to me about what is lawful. I am the master. More than that, that genitive term, that in the sentence structure, what Jesus is saying is not only he is master over Sabbath, but he is the epitome of rest. He is Sabbath. And his disciples happen to be with him. So what we learn from Jesus just in that context is that Sabbath is about intimacy with God. It is the moment given for restoration of relationship with God. And it's also time for replenishment of basic needs. Here's the thing. You can't detox without replenishment. You can't take something out without adding something back in. If we're going to take out toxic time, we have to put in restoration time. Sabbath is not just about resting, but it's also about restoring. Jesus looks at the man that they're looking at. Every eye is on this man, and Jesus tells him, come on up. The man gets up in front of everyone. He got up and he stood there. Then Jesus said to them. Now, you have to understand that if I'm the man, I don't know everything that's going on. Jesus knows what's happening in the minds of the people. The people are looking at him. They're not saying anything. Jesus is looking at him, understanding what they're thinking, and he tells the man to get up. If I'm this man, I'm reluctantly going, and I don't know who you are. I've heard about you. I'm not pretty sure who you are. I'm just walking. I didn't really expect much today. I wonder how many people walk into this place not expecting much. I wonder how many Sabbaths you come here not expecting anything. I'm pretty sure this man is there out of habit. He's there just another Sabbath day. His hand has been withered for a while. He's actually learned how to live with a withered hand. I wonder how many of us have learned to live with our addictions. Have learned to live with our habits. We actually don't expect God to do anything when we walk into this place. The most we expect for is that the preacher had something good to say today and that maybe the music was okay. How many of us walk into Sabbath expecting change? expecting restoration, expecting replenishment. We go into a day that God says was made for you, was blessed and sacred, set apart from the very beginning of creation. And yet when we walk into Friday evening and are leaving Saturday evening, we didn't expect anything different than we didn't do work that day. How can we not walk into this sacred space, this sacred time, expecting a shift? How can we not walk into this blessed time going, this moment is blessed, this time is blessed, I expect something different? He walked up that day, I don't know what he was expecting, but he definitely was not expecting what comes next. He walks up, and Jesus looks at him. And Jesus said to them, I ask you, in other words, I have a question for you. You're the ones with all the questions. I have a question. The thing about Jesus' questions, you can never actually answer them. I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath? In other words, how do you interpret the law? What does this mean for you? Which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? Does the law permit good deeds? Does the law make room for? Does it allow for doing good? Or is it to do evil? To save life or to destroy it? Now, I mean, obviously, you answer this question no matter how, you're losing. If the religious leaders go, of course it is to do good. That's what you and I would say. We'd say the same thing. I remember in another community, I won't name it, there's a couple of people that called me one day because our young adults decided to go and restore some homes for the homeless. The homes had burnt down, and they were cleaning out the house. They were moving things around. They were cleaning out the house that day. Veterans got together, firemen got together. They were restoring this group of homes for the homeless in the city. And someone called me, Pastor, do you know what those young people are doing today? Tell me. Of course I knew. Tell me. They're downtown and they're doing some service project today instead of coming to church. And my child told me, you said it's okay for her not to go to church. How can you say that going to church is less important than taking care of the homeless? It almost sounded straight out of Scripture. Because this is where our following words. There are 6 days. Now, for those of you who know your Bible, you know who said these things. There are 6 days for you to do good stuff. Sabbath is for church. Now, I had to hold my laughter. But the reality is, as we continued talking, this same person said, of course it's okay to do good on Sabbath, but you have to go to church. You have to go to church. See, the religious rulers would never say to Jesus, no, it's not good to do good on the Sabbath. Of course it's good to do on the Sabbath, but you just can't heal. You could do good as long as it's not exerting any, actual work, As long as you don't get too tired, you can do good. But what I love about just this question is that he leaves no middle ground. This is what you and I have to wrestle with as Sabbath keepers, those of us who are part of this tradition, is if you call yourself a Sabbath keeper, is it good to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil? You know what that question means? You're either doing good or you're doing evil. Is it okay on Sabbath to save life or to destroy it? You know what that means? You're either saving life or by not doing something, you are destroying it. Meaning, if you are not part of the solution, you are absolutely part of the problem. If you're not pursuing the solution, you are participating in the problem. He leaves no middle ground. If you are a Sabbath keeper, then you're not someone who simply rests from the burdens of life. You are a restorer from the burdens of others. Okay, let me put it another way, because you might not have gotten my English. It's okay, it's one of my 3 languages, so I apologize. I'm not the best at it. You can't just rest from your problems. You have to restore others from theirs. Sabbath isn't about ceasing from activity. It is shifting perspective. It is living from me to we. Sabbath reminds me that I'm part of a greater community. That I am a human being. And all other human beings depend on me. I am not alone in my fight. It moves me from, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? To, wow, other people have problems too. It moves me from, oh, this is the worst thing. Oh my gosh, my week has been, to all of a sudden, let me hear for what other people are going through. It moves me from living for myself to living for community. And if I am a part of this heritage, the only way I uplift my heritage is when Sabbath becomes good for everyone. I don't care about your Sabbath if your Sabbath doesn't do anything for me. Why should I enter into a moment that's only good for you? Your invitation to rest only matters when you provide me rest first. Can you imagine what this city would look like if somehow the 200 people in here made Melbourne better on Sabbath? Can you imagine what they would say if they knew, whoa, Sabbath is coming? Well, you know those Sabbath people, they're going to be in the streets. Those Sabbath people, they're going to be restoring people. Oh, man, this is horrible on Monday. Oh, don't worry, Friday night, the Sabbath people are coming. Can you imagine what the community would look like if people knew that not only did you get to rest, but you provided rest on Sabbath? We are part of a cruise. It was called Vacation with a Mission. Cruise with a Purpose. The first one we did, we had 350 young adult Adventists on this cruise that's usually for retirees on Holland America. Retirees usually go there just to rest and relax, and they had 350 young adults on this same cruise with them. And folks didn't know what to do. And I remember come Sabbath day, people were wondering, what do we do? Do we go to the restaurants? Do we not go? What's happening? What do we do? What's happening on Sabbath day? Because you already paid for it. Do you just miss out on food and stay in your room? What do we do? And I remember the wisest decision from the North American division was something, it was my proudest moment of being a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. My proudest moment. We decided as Adventists that day to give the waiters and the servers and the people who care for us a break. We washed dishes. We took care of them that day. We waited on them. And I remember over the loudspeaker when the captain said, today some of you have experienced generosity, and it's because the Seventh-day Adventist Church celebrates Sabbath. And on that day, they rest from their works to take care of their community. $350 Adventists, 600 people. More people cared about Sabbath that day. What would it look like if we said on Sabbath, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us make it a rejoicing day for everyone we encounter. How can we stop looking at us and start looking at start looking at them, start looking at community, start looking at those around us? How can we stop thinking of ourselves and start thinking, how do I care for? How do I provide for? How do I look after those who are around me? What if on Sabbath day, it wasn't just about me taking a break, but giving other people a break? Is it good to do good or to do evil? To save life or to destroy it? Of course, no one answered the question that day, and so Jesus told the man, stretch out your hand. And the man's hand was restored. You know what's missing from this story? The man never asked to be healed. I want you to go read your New Testament and check it. Almost every encounter with Jesus where a miracle takes place, Jesus says, your faith has healed you. Ha ha! He didn't show any faith that day. There was no your faith has healed you. The only thing that restored him was the Lord of the Sabbath. Because on Sabbath, you don't need to ask. The day is holy. The day is sacred. Your concerns become clearer. Jesus was teaching us that on Sabbath day, I don't need to wait for somebody to ask me. I should be on the lookout to see, where are the broken? Where are those who are ill? Where are those who are sick? If I'm going to detox me, it's so I can detox others. If I'm going to be free, it's so I can free the others. Sabbath is not just about giving me a break. It's about restoring my community.